Welcome to the Cyber Sensei at LearnTheSword.com. This tutorial demonstrates the three basic angles to draw, execute a cut, and sheath a Japanese sword. I will execute the first angle and draw from a horizontal position where the sword is parallel to the floor, about a 90-degree angle, give or take 5 degrees. This position sets up the sword's trajectory to execute good, strong, and consistent horizontal cuts. Upon completion of the cut, the next step is to horizontally sheath the sword back into position. The next two draws follow the same process, but just at different angles. The next angle being a diagonal where you draw, execute the cut, and sheath the sword all at a 45-degree angle. The 45-degree angle, give or take 5 degrees. The next is a vertical cut, or about 1 degree, again, give or take 5 degrees, where you draw, execute the cut, and then sheath the sword again. Practice these patterns until they are ingrained into your rote memory, and you can smoothly practice these sheaths and draws from these basic three angles. If you'd like to view the complete tutorial, join us at LearnTheSword.com. Looking at these basic angles, the horizontal, the diagonal, and the vertical one using a bokuto is very simple. Bring your hands down to your side, bring it into your basic triangle, and then execute the cut horizontally, and then bring it back. Same thing with a diagonal one. Bring it up to your hips because it was at this area. Bring it up to your hips, and then let go. Don't try to bring the sword out of like you have a sheath on it, because this is wood. It doesn't have a sheath, so don't make it look like it has a sheath. Just let go with your hand and execute the technique. For example, with a 45-degree angle, I will lift both hands up to my hips. I will grab the sword. I will adjust it with my left hand. If you look here, I have a vertical angle, more of a diagonal, and a horizontal one. So if I want to execute a cut at any angle, I want to set this up. Because if I set up for a vertical angle and I try to execute a diagonal one, you can do it. It just won't be as strong and consistent as it could. Stepping back, looking at this now, if I lift up the bokuto, I adjust it to about a 45-degree angle, I let go with my left hand, and then I execute the cut. I bring back the bokuto in the exact same fashion, grab it with my left hand, and then I stand into it. This is a very good exercise to teach you the basic footprint on how to draw, execute a cut, and put away the sword at three basic angles. Horizontal, up, turn horizontal, grab in your triangle, release with your left hand, execute the horizontal cut with your left hand still on your hip. Bringing the sword back to your left hip, re-gripping it with your left hand, standing into it, and coming down to your side. The same, again, let's look at the diagonal cut. Up to your hips, turn the sword till it's about at a 45-degree diagonal angle, then grab the sword with your right hand, forming your triangle in front, letting go with your left hand and executing that cut at that 45-degree angle. Upon completion, bring it back, following the same pattern as you grab with your left arm, and stand up. The next being a vertical angle, which again isn't really done that much in this angle. A lot of the vertical angles, instead of looking straight ahead, coming in and trying to make a cut like this, a lot of the vertical angles are where the sword comes in vertically, comes up above your head, and it comes down this way vertically. There are three basic angles: horizontal, diagonal, and vertical ones. I will begin with the horizontal position first. The horizontal position is what I would call a classic position, where most of the horizontal sheaths and draws are done in a seiza position, a Japanese kneeling position, where the sword can't be brought down like this where you lift the sword up. Everything has to be done in a horizontal position because you're so close to the ground. The sword's sheath is parallel to the floor, give or take 5 degrees. Very, very few people can make it exactly at 90 degrees here. Sometimes it's a little this way, sometimes it's a little bit this way. But then again, it takes years and years to make this perfect, and also you have to think the length of the sword. Some swords are 29 and 30 inches in length, where anything longer than this I have to lean forward. Some swords are a little bit shorter where you can stay and sit up or stand up straight and you can make a better cut that way. All in all, don't worry about getting a shorter sword now as much as practicing pulling the saya, the sheath, backwards to gain a little bit more room. And that's where you see a lot of problems with the horizontal cut, is a lot of times you shortchange it right here, lean forward, and then you bring it in. What I'd like you to do is bring the habaki to the koeguchi and then pull back in this direction where the sword can easily work in because it has more room to work with. Another point to follow is when you finish executing the cut and you have executed this horizontal cut, take your hand and twist it down a little bit. So instead of your hand being like this, it's a little bit over on the side to help keep your elbows a little bit straighter. There might have a tendency, like you feel like you're leaning forward this way a little bit, and you might have a tendency you might cut your fingers, but with a little bit of practice, those fears will also dissipate. Another thing you want to work on with the horizontal cut is to be able to execute the cut without cutting your fingers. A lot of times people take the sword at this horizontal cut and they don't get it all the way out. So what happens is they start scoring the inside of the sheath here. If you score the inside of the sheath, it's fine for the first 50 or 60 tries, but after a while, the sword blade might sneak out of here when you pull too hard, which tells me that you don't have your sheath, the sword, and your angles up correctly. You're doing one thing when your body's doing another, or you're thinking one thing and your body's doing, or your right hand doesn't know what your left hand is doing. With that said again, practice over and over and over until everything becomes smoother. The next one is your diagonal cut, which is about a 45-degree angle. This one has a little bit more gray area in it because it's more of a traditional thought than a classical one. With this, you want to pull the sword or draw the sword and execute the sword all at a 45-degree angle. This is mostly done by people who practice batodo, which is drawing the sword and cutting an object and then sheathing the sword. When they make a cut and draw, they can't afford to take the shot and pull back and cut this way. They have to make sure that the sheath, the sword, and their aiming, timing, and rhythm all come off at the same time, so upon the sword leaving the sheath, it can execute a very, very good cut. We say the diagonal cut is at about 45 degrees, but figure that you can be 5, sometimes 10 degrees off on these diagonals depending on the length of the sword, how your body is positioned, how you're moving in and out of the target. A lot of times when you see the military styles like Toyama or Nakamura styles, you will see more of the 45-degree angle compared to like ones you see in university, the ones that deal with the Zen Nihon Kendo Renmei or the All Japan Kendo Federation, is where the swords are a little bit more positioned this way in a classical sense. Also, when you start thinking that, gee, you're starting to draw the sword at a 45-degree angle, 50-degree angle, around there, and then you think, well, what about a vertical one? Well, drawing the sword, making a cut, and then bringing it back and sheathing it at a vertical angle, say -1 degree, around there, isn't that practical drawing with one hand. It always feels like you're going to shave off the side of your head here, and then when you bring it back. The secret about this is that when you raise the sword, you bring it over to the opposite side, and then you usually cut down with two hands. And then bringing the sword back to its vertical position, you can do it a little bit more this way. When you practice, probably the most useful of all these sheaths or these angles, cuts or draws, will be at your 45-degree angle.